Welcome to another episode of Purpose Today. I'm your host, Dr. April Dobson, and I'm very excited today that I have an opportunity to do a live question and answer session with all of you on a topic that we talked about in a prior episode, essential strategies before restructures. Now, if you are planning to undergo a reorganization in your office, in your company, in your business, whatever size organization you have, these strategies are going to help you to ensure that you have an effective reorg. And I want to give an opportunity for you all to ask the questions so that you transform your organization while you take the right approaches in the reorg. Now, I know that many of you had a lot of questions when we talked about this topic before, and we're going to jump right in. I won't even do any sponsorship messages at the beginning, but I think it's important for us to go back and just talk about some of the things that we discussed when we were talking about the reorg and things that you'll need to do. And I also want to make sure that whatever your questions are, I can answer those. So as you have questions, please go ahead and drop those questions in the chat. It's going to be very, very helpful and ensuring that when you do undergo reorganization in your company, that you do that efficiently and effectively. So I want to just recap what we talked about because I do believe that the questions that you all might have will relate to what we talked about previously. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So if you missed the episode previously, it's okay because I'm going to recap these for you, and any questions that you have, you'll be able to answer those. And so if you could just put your questions and your comments in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer those, and I'll go as quickly as I can to answer those for you. Now, if you don't mind typing in the chat where your company is located, and if you have any potential plans for a reorganization, or if you've ever undergone a reorg within your organization, that would be very, very, very helpful. And so let's go ahead and hop right in. And I do thank you for those who are watching on today. So I'm going to do my best to ensure that as I'm recapping the 5 things that we talked about previously, that those are also added to the screen so that you have an opportunity to watch the chat to ensure that I'm able to answer your questions. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. For those of you who might recall from last time, the very first thing that you want to do is make sure that you're communicating and you're collaborating. A lot of leaders will wait until to do that last. So you want to be sure to communicate and collaborate. That is important to do that first. You want to ensure that you're clarifying the mission because you want to make sure before you reorg, you're clear on what the mission is, the direction that you need to go. Because if something needs to shift there, then it's necessary to do it before you complete the new structure. Introduce any efficiencies, determine what your baseline resources are, and you'll need to collaborate with stakeholders for that and review and approve proposed structures. So I already see we have people adding in the comments. So hello, thank you for posting in the comments. So I'm going to start with some questions that were asked previously, and then whatever questions you have, just drop those in the chat and I will do my best and answer those. So one of the questions that was asked previously, and we're gonna Give me just a moment. I want to make sure that I call back the questions that you all asked before, and then any questions that you have tonight, or at least the people who were watching before, and any questions that you have tonight, put those in the chat. So one of the questions that was asked earlier from when I talked about this topic before, we actually had Rochelle asked a question. Rochelle asked which of these 5 strategies usually delivers the results the fastest. And that was an excellent question that Rochelle asked. So I do appreciate Rochelle doing that. Whatever your question is, go ahead and put it in the chat. So anytime you are going to undergo a reorg, the fastest results are going to come from communication and collaboration. So it's very important that if you're planning to do a reorg, if you're considering a reorg, even if a final decision hasn't been made, you want to start with early communication. You want to communicate to staff within the organization, staff at all levels, and you want to ensure that you're communicating verbally first. So either through a town hall or through an all hands meeting, some type of meeting that you're meeting with your staff to communicate to them that there is a possibility that your organization might be undergoing a reorganization, and getting an opportunity for them to ask their questions, share their input, share what they will envision to ensure that you have a successful reorganization if you choose to move forward with it. The other thing that should be done with that is collaboration. So you should ensure that staff are collaborating with internal stakeholders and external stakeholders as necessary to ensure that you have appropriate planning and that you're not missing, crucial processes and crucial steps, and also that when you're envisioning what the new organization would look like, when you're thinking about that you're not missing critical elements that are needed, because it really could make a difference on what the structure looks like based on what is critical for your organization. And thank you, Mason, for putting Georgia, that your organization is in Georgia. Thank you, Jason, for sharing that this episode is so insightful. You are very welcome. I do appreciate you sharing that positive feedback and for viewing on today. So I want to go and talk about more of the questions that were previously asked, but I'm watching the chat too, just to ensure that there aren't any questions that you all are putting in today that would be beneficial for everyone. Thank you, Branson, for putting in that comment that you're loving this series. I see your question. How do you keep morale high during big changes? Excellent question, Branson. So I do believe one of the ways, I'm going to mention a few ways that you can keep morale high. One of the ways to keep morale high is by doing, what I talked about, the communication and the collaboration. That's key, because when you are transparent with the staff in your organization, then they know that they can trust you. And when there's trust, there's usually higher morale. Additionally, the collaboration is going to help people to work together. There's a sense of synergy that'll be created with that. And then also introducing engagement activities. When you have effective engagement, that brings teamwork. It also increases the morale. And so normally, if you can stay ahead of any assumptions, any rumors, that's going to be very beneficial. So thank you so much, Branson, for asking that excellent question. I think it is one that many organizations will need, right? And leaders within organizations will benefit from that immensely. So thank you so much for asking that question. Now, I see Antoine's question. How do you communicate a reorg without creating fear? Antoine, that is an excellent question. Certainly as leaders, we don't want to create fear. And the best way to communicate it without creating fear is in your framing and in your messaging, right? It's all about how you communicate. And I do believe that tone when you're communicating orally is important. Even when you're sending out communications that are in writing, being intentional about the verbiage that you're utilizing. And I'll give some examples. So let's just say you are thinking about a reorganization and you schedule an all hands or you schedule a town hall to meet with your staff. Now, if you go into that town hall and you say, look, we're going to have a reorg and it doesn't matter what people think about it, right? That is not the right approach. That is not the right tone. You're probably going to create fear. And you're also probably going to have an issue with your retention. You're going to have an issue with engagement. You're going to have an issue with the feedback. But if you start that meeting and say, hello everyone, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time of day it is, thank you all for attending today's town hall. I have some exciting developments that I would like to share. And, we have some things that we are considering for the company. And we're having this town hall or we're having this all hands because we want to hear from you. We want your input before we make any plans, right? So when you start with that framing that you're excited about some potential new developments with the company and you share that decisions have not been made, but you want to ensure that you're communicating with everyone, you're giving them an opportunity to weigh in, you're giving them an opportunity to share recommendations. That definitely gives a sense of peace, a sense of calm. And then if you share that the organization is potentially going to undergo a reorg and you share the timeline that you're considering, that if you do make a decision to reorg, that will be communicated with staff before it takes effect and before the planning processes are completed. And then if you also share what is the underlying causation for the reorg, right? People want to know why the company might be undergoing a reorg. And if you and you use ambiguity, that's going to instill fear to you in terms of what you know, and you let them know that it will be a partnership and a collaborative effort. That's going to go over a lot better, and it's going to ensure that as you're moving forward with plans, that you are avoiding, fear. The other thing that will help to communicate the reorg without creating fear is to let them know that they are going to be informed every step of the way and they're going to be able to provide recommendations and input every step of the way, and it's going to remain collaborative. And you let them know the communication methods that you intend to use and that other leaders in the organization intend to use in the future. I also, as a seasoned professional, know that it is excellent when you're able to provide insight on all of the factors that will be considered. And if you know that you're doing a reorg and you're not going to reduce the number of positions, or you won't be reducing any positions that are occupied, that will also reduce fear because people know that they are not at risk for losing their job. So avoid the ambiguity, keep it clear, and ensure that you're giving an opportunity for everyone to provide their input. That really truly makes a difference. So, excellent questions. Thank you all for the questions and comments. Please keep them coming. I think that the questions that each person has, chances are there's someone else who has that same question. And I see Gerard put in, I appreciate the real world examples you're sharing. So thank you very much, Gerard. I'm glad that these real world examples are helpful. I do believe that any employee in any organization will always appreciate when they have insight in advance regarding potential changes and when they have an opportunity to weigh in. You can also use surveys to help you to ensure that you're gaining insight from staff. Sometimes people are not going to be open enough to speak up in a town hall and share input or ask a question, but if you have a mechanism for staff to submit inquiries, submit concerns, submit questions, that will help to ensure that individuals who are less likely to speak up, that they still have their voice heard in a meaningful way. So great, great, great questions. So I want to also talk about one of the other questions that was asked when we talked about these strategies previously on a prior episode, because again, I was able to answer the questions in the chat, but I didn't have an opportunity to expound as much as I would have liked. So I do want to ensure that I have an opportunity to share those. So I did have a question from Jeff previously. He said, how can small organizations apply these strategies effectively? And ultimately, at the end of the day, these strategies are going to be implemented regardless of the size of the organization. But even though the same strategies are going to be used overall, regardless of the organizational size, the only variance to that is oftentimes when you have smaller organizations, they don't have as many positions, they don't have as many departments, and because of that, it might be more conducive to engage and collaborate and partner with external stakeholders and contractors a lot sooner, right? Just depending on the needs of the organization. And that is something that will need to be assessed early on. And you want to ensure that you keep in mind that everything is not a one size fits all. So you do want to ensure that you are customizing the approach and the strategies to fit the needs of your organization. If you are a smaller company and you only have 20 employees within your company, well, you might actually choose to do a team building instead of a town hall. There's just different ways that you can approach that initial conversation about the potential to reorg. Now, I do want to say to you that often reorganizations, they look different for different organizations. In some reorgs that I have been involved in, agencies or units have actually taken an entire division and have realigned them to another entity across the overall agency. And it required that the impacted employees choose if they wanted to relocate or if they wanted to take another option that was available, right? Because the other part of the organization that was assuming that particular division was in Virginia, and the original division was located in Colorado. Now, if you have a situation that will have potentially drastic changes, you want to take additional steps, right, to try to mitigate any concerns, right? If you know that someone might So I saw that there was HR transition. HR can best this transition. HR is very helpful in providing insight on any applicable legislation, labor laws, specific federal and state laws, and areas of compliance. HR can also in ensuring that as there are potential restructures that they provide insight needed for any changes to job descriptions, ensuring that the hierarchy is appropriately annotated, that the process in the pre-reorg structure and the post-reorg structure, that is transitioned smoothly. Potentially relocating staff who don't want to relocate, they might help to outplace or reassign staff. So there's a lot of roles if you have resistance from senior staff, it isn't necessarily a bad thing. The resistance could actually be a good thing because the senior staff could have some insight on potential blind spots, things that need to be considered. So you really want to get to the bottom of the resistance and have conversations. So, and if you continue to keep the open dialogue, the open communication, that's really the best way to handle resistance. Again, everything is not a one size fits all, but communication is always key, and having those collaborative efforts are key. And having senior staff partner along in the process and collaborate in the process, they're going to be a great interface between their direct reports and other managers who they may be supervising. So you want to be mindful of that. So thank you, David, for that compliment. You're very welcome. I do appreciate you all engaging. And Branson, I do apologize for the issues with the connectivity for the live. So I do believe I've answered all of the questions that I've seen on YouTube in the comments. Thank you all for attending on today. I do appreciate all of you taking time out of your schedules on both the LinkedIn live, on the Facebook live, and on the YouTube live. I saw all of the questions coming through on YouTube, so I do appreciate all of you. Looks like there's one other question. What tools or frameworks do you recommend for planning? And so again, there may be some specific tools depending on your organization and the size. So I do recommend that as you're going through the process and you're planning a reorg, to ensure that your organization has a way that you can communicate and disseminate the information easily. So after you've met with everyone, so you want to ensure that you have the mechanisms to meet with all of your staff. If you're geographically located, you should be using some type of virtual meeting system Zoom, Teams, whatever your organization chooses. In terms of the planning, there's project management software that might be good. I also believe it's good to have some sort of a SharePoint that staff within your organization can go and view documents. They can have collaborative discussions. Those are some of the tools that you want to introduce. In terms of specific frameworks, I talked on the other episode about the importance of having focus groups. So you definitely want to have focus groups as you're having the collaborative efforts. And then again, you want to meet with your staff to see what recommendations are necessary based on the specific needs and size of your organization. So I do believe I've answered all of the questions that you all have asked on today. I know there were some questions that came up in the other episode when we went through all 5 of these strategies. I know that one of them that came up was about culture and the impact of culture, and you definitely want to make sure that you're considering the culture of your organization during all phases. So before, so pre, during, and post reorg, because the culture is going to be impacting in how it's implemented, how you disseminate information, how it's received, and so that is key. So you want to ensure that you have woven the culture throughout all of your planning and implementation efforts, as well as considering the culture in any communications that you release. So thank you all again for taking time to view this live. Thank you, Jack, for that feedback that this live session is incredibly helpful for leaders. And, I've had to be involved in so many reorgs throughout my career in HR, and I just want to ensure that you all are equipped with what you need to be successful should you ever have to undergo a reorg. So I do appreciate you all tuning in today to watch this special live episode of Purpose Today with Dr. April Dobson, and I have appreciated communicating with all of you and the engagement. So thank you all for viewing and for your engagement today. It's been a pleasure to talk about these essential strategies before restructures and how you can transform your organization using these 5 expert strategies for a purpose-driven reorg. So just looking back at the comments, I do see there's 2 other comments there. So I see what follow-up steps are critical after the reorg is complete. Great question, Achal. Hopefully I'm saying your name properly. So you want to ensure that you're continuing that communication and collaboration. It's important to have a survey that you actually ask all staff and the internal and holders their perspective regarding pre and post reorg, what is working well, what can be enhanced, and that you also are ensuring that post restructure that you are making an assessment of your operations. You're seeing the differences in productivity to see if there's a notable difference. So data analytics is going to be very important as well. So thank you for asking that question. Brandon says, can purpose-driven restructuring improve employee engagement? Absolutely. It definitely improves employee engagement, because when you use the purpose-driven restructuring, it allows your organization and the leaders in your organization to ensure that you have the right mission and that the mission is suitable and proper for where you are and the direction that you're going in, so that any plans for the reorg are really aligned with the mission. And then also ensuring that as you are shifting divisions, as you're shifting employees to new teams, or new teams are being established to better meet the needs of the organization, that you're looking at the workforce collectively and individually, looking at their purpose to ensure that you're allowing people to be purpose aligned, especially if they're not prior to the reorg. So, great question, Brandon. Thank you for that. And you're very welcome, Veronica. Thank you so much for viewing and for that. I hope you have a great rest of the evening as well. And I don't see any questions, so thank you all again for viewing tonight, for all of the wonderful questions that you all have asked as it relates to reorganizations and ensuring that you position your organization for success. So thank you all again for watching it. I am just ensuring that I haven't missed any of your questions and your comments, because I definitely want to leave the session and have some questions that are lingering. So thank you all again for your engagement today, for viewing. This has just been an absolute pleasure to engage with you all on tonight. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, a wonderful weekend, and I encourage you, if you haven't hit the subscription button, I encourage you to do so. That way you can receive updates on new episodes, and it gives you an opportunity to ask your questions and comments anytime we have a live. So thank you all again. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you for your engagement. And as we close out tonight, we have a special announcement. I just want to say, if you are someone who has individuals in your organization, or you're someone who has a desire to pivot professionally, you want to network with like-minded professionals, I do encourage you to consider joining the Purpose Professionals community. The Purpose Professionals community has relocated to its new location, and I will be dropping the Purpose Professionals community link in the comments so that you all have an opportunity to identify whether or not the Purpose Professionals community is suitable for you. So if you are a professional who has a desire to pivot professionally, you want to grow in your career, you want to network with like-minded professionals, consider joining the Purpose Professionals community. And finally, if your organization requires school and learning management software, then we have special information for you, and you can reach out to Mavtech for your school and learning management system needs. Stay tuned for this special promotional video.
A lack of adequate school and learning management software should never be a barrier to learning environments in your organization. Don't waste time in ensuring your organization